All right, as the last few
Oh my God,
people
heaps.
stream in,
Great.
welcome once again. My name is Kell Delaney. I am based in Boulder, Colorado. I've worked with Conversant for, I think, 7 years now. I am also joined by my panelist colleague, Max Affleck from Melbourne, Australia. He's in the Australia office. And then our new as of the beginning of this year, Managing Director, Gretchen Gagel, also in Australia. So it'll be a mix of accents on this call. And then you'll also notice Emma Rose. She will be monitoring the chat. It's a little much sometimes for those of us in the conversation to also read through the chat and stay in the conversation. So if you have questions or if you have comments, those that she thinks are particularly interesting to the conversation or fit what we're talking about, she'll intervene and ask the questions for you. And then that gives us the opportunity to respond. I think that's mostly it to start. The couple other things I'll just say, as far as chat, we've found that some people love it, some people do not. So please, if you want to use it and you like to chat back and forth with folks, you're welcome to. If you prefer to just watch and listen to the conversation, that's fine as well. Our topic for today is wonder. Why should we care about wonder? I would actually propose personally that wonder is what has allowed human beings to thrive. And as such is something particularly powerful at this really uncertain time in the world. So I'm going to pass it to Gretchen to start. Gretchen, what is wonder to you?
You know, I'd love to start with a story. I was sitting in a meeting in a university setting, and we were talking about our donor relationship management system. And we would call that a CRM, or customer relationship management system, in the business world. And we were talking about a new system and going out and benchmarking other universities and who should we benchmark. And I sat up and I said, you know, what if we went and benchmarked Google or Facebook or Toyota or somebody else? And there was this pause around the table. Everybody looked at me like I was insane, and they went right on talking and just completely ignored my comment. And wonder is that ability to break out of our thinking, to think outside these structures and conceptual frameworks that we have in our brain, which we need to create kind of order out of chaos of our thinking, but to not get stuck in the past, not be tethered by the past, and not be able to be curious about the future.
That's great, Gretchen. I love that. And you know, for me, I think the way I sort of experience wonder really connects well to that, because for me, it's a place of play, and like you said, that curiosity and creativity. In a lot of ways, for me, it's the antidote to fear. It's when I start to get nervous and scared, it gives me something to do. And wonder expands the possibilities of what we're capable of doing, especially in uncertainty. Max, what would you say?
Yeah, for me, I think of it often as a mindset thing, which is such a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot. But I think, Gretchen, you know, your story really exemplifies that for some people, you know, if they're not in that mindset at that time, it can be so challenging that it's the equivalent of being shot out into space, you know. But we've all been around someone who has that natural affinity. You know, people talk about how children just have that natural, they're in that mindset already, and that's just the lens they see the world through. You know, you go, oh, look at this tiny little elephant, and they'll just roll with you, while other people will roll their eyes, you know. I think for me, one thing I find really interesting is the physical feeling of it. For me, wonder often feels, when I'm on the precipice of wonder, it feels like fear, because, you know, I'm already fearful that my ideas won't be perfect and shiny and great, or they'll be judged, you know. So there's that little nervousness that makes me know, okay, I'm getting into it now.
Yeah, it reminds me, and for those of you who happen to watch the teaser video, one of the things I shared in that was this analogy that I've always had in my head that I really enjoy. It helps me sit in this well, because there's that fear and there's that, oh my gosh, you know, what am I going to do? And humans are attuned to the threat, the challenge, and we are for our safety. But you know, the analogy I used was a sailboat in a port. And we always have choices of where we put our energy. And in some cases, it's really valuable to focus on anchors and the things that are in the way, the problems that we want to solve. But the alternative is to look out into the distance to where you want to go, to get excited about that, and then start putting up sails. Gives you something to do, like I was saying before, to that fear. And then next thing you know, you're dragging your anchors. And that becomes frustrating. So you have more motivation to get rid of them. But at least, for wonder, and especially now, that's where that possibility and purpose is. It's like gives us a way to respond to that fear.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really great point. Wonder needs to be grounded in purpose. So we have an identity as an organization. We have a purpose. We have a reason for existing, start with why. So it's not just about, crazy out of the box thinking about everything. It's thinking about the intent that we use to live out our purpose as an organization. And that sometimes that may need to change dramatically, the actual strategies and tactics to accomplish that purpose. And how do we leverage a community of thinking in a way of wondering what that might look like?
That's great.
We have a great question in the chat already, actually. Does wonder have to be spoken? From John.
Max,
I don't think it does. So I was talking to Kell the other day about how we were talking about how we both love getting into the outdoors and how that kind of resets our minds. And I think for me, that's a time when I'm definitely in wonder, because I think wonder is very similar to being in awe of something that is bigger and more beautiful and greater than I am. Like you said, Gretchen, that idea that's bigger than me. I think a lot of us are drawn to be something that's bigger than us, and I think that you can just look at something, gaze at something, wonder about something, and that's just a felt experience. And it can be, more tangible in a brainstorm, in an ideation session.
Gretchen, what would you say to that? Does wonder have to be spoken?
Yeah, my wonder happens. My wonder recently, I've become an outdoor runner for the first time. I know my friends that are on here are going to fall over laughing, but I can't get to the gym, so I'm out running. And I've learned from a good friend who wrote a book on neuroscience that when we can quiet the noise in our mind, that's when our wonder can escape from those other feelings. And so it's running or, doing things like that when I can really kind of roll things around in my head and wonder about possibilities.
Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna, for those who know me, you'll laugh, but I'm gonna get a little nerdy here for a second. But a lot of what wonder comes from is this part of the brain that turns on when we're bored, when we're in the shower, when you're running, when you don't have something else distracting you. And it really is, it's become a liability in our current world because we have gotten so used to like podcasts and shows and music and all sorts of stuff that's constantly bombarding us. We've decreased the amount of time that part of our brain activates. But we can be intentional about it too. I'm curious for Max and Gretchen, we've talked about this a little bit, but what do you feel like, why is this relevant now?
Yeah. So I just came out of a board meeting, literally a 2-hour board meeting of a board that I chair that's an international NGO. And we are excited about the disruption causing us to leapfrog 2 to 3 years into the future, where maybe it would have taken us that long to get there. Disruptions do drive innovation, but we have to be able to wonder. And that's what we were doing as a board and a staff leadership team, just throwing out what could feel like crazy ideas. And we have that psychologically safe space, I think, as a board, the relationships that we've developed where we can wonder and play and be curious about what the future could be. So I think it's incredibly relevant right now. The companies that are going to come out of here, the organizations that are going to come out of the situation the best are the ones that are going to take the time to wonder what the disruption means for them.
And I think it's, all of like a lot of the research, I love reading research about habits, and so many research about habit formation talk about how habits are the best time to ingrain a new one is during periods of change, transition, disruption. And I think we're in a unique time where everyone is experiencing change and transition disruption on multiple levels, you know, in their personal, in their living situation, in their working situation. They're seeing it in their governments. And so I think there is a real potential to create new, you know, to create the new in all of that disruption. Everyone is perfectly suited to ingrain new habits, new ways of being, new ways of thinking, more so than they would have been in times of stability.
Yeah, I love that. You know, if you look throughout history, some of the most creative moments in human history have been the times where we have to do something different and we have to figure it out. We can't operate the way we have been. And, you know, I think the temptation, you know, for me, what I observe when we get nervous or uncomfortable or things totally get disrupted is to clamp down on becoming more efficient and more measured and do the processes we've done historically well more and more. And that has its place, especially when things are urgent. You need to, until you stop the bleeding effectively. But like you're saying, Max, and like you were just sharing, Gretchen, there's this great opportunity to turn in the other direction and say, well, what are we capable of creating? I've heard a lot of leaders say, you know, we're just hanging on until things get back to normal. I would say that we're not going back. We're going to an unknown future, but that's where wonder has its place. We can look and say, well, what do I want to cause? What do I want to create? What can we make out of this circumstance? Like you were saying, Gretchen, I think that's a beautiful example for that future.
Yeah, and I think we need to think about contribution. We talk about community contribution and choice here a lot at Conversant, and different people have different capacity to wonder. I think that's one of the things that we need to be cognizant of as leaders, that, you know, leveraging the people that are really good at it, helping the people that may be kind of wonder challenged, but understanding the fear and creating that psychologically safe space where people do feel like they can play. We just had this in our team meeting, Max. You know, here I am brand new to the Asia Pacific team and the Conversant team, and I was thinking about something the other day, and I said to the team, hey, I've kind of put this in a PowerPoint. Can I play? And then I played with Emma Rose with this. And so to feel psychologically safe that I may not be saying things in the right way, I'm just playing with this. Can I come play with you? Can you contribute to my thinking about this?
That's next time we have a meeting where I don't have any good ideas, I'm just going to say that I'm wonder challenged. That's great. I'm going to take full permission from you, Gretchen. I appreciate that.
There you go.
I think one other point about why this is relevant now that's been really, like, I'm a big student of history. I love history and I love economics. I studied economics, and you know, I think if we look at some of the things that came out of the Great Depression and the interwar period, you know, we had Keynesian economics came out of that period. The New Deal in the US came out of that period. The NHS in the UK came out of that period. A whole new way of thinking, economic thinking, came out of that. A new, in a lot of ways, the welfare state came out of that. Which, you know, love it or hate it, it was a new way of thinking. For anyone who's dialing in from Melbourne or in Australia, we've got this spectacular road called the Great Ocean Road that was a huge healing process after the Great Depression and the First World War, where it was this massive public project, and now it's an icon. You know, it's stunning, and people have enjoyed it for nearly 100 years. And I wonder what's the Great Ocean Road that's coming out of this. And I think that all of those things are born of wonder. And I think that, you know, when you look at the different ways wonder looks, you know, someone might say, oh, I'm not very creative, or that's not my skill, I'm wonder challenged, you know. But I think it can look really different. You know, Keynesian economics, some people would look at that and think, how can you be creative in, you know, economic theory that's a lot of math, but you can be. And how can you be creative with you know, building a road that's just, you know, asphalt, but that can be just as wonderful as, you know, someone who has all of the frills and the sparkles and the eloquent words. You know, I think wonder can look really different. There are accountants who are really full of wonder, and there are artists who are full of wonder.
I love that, Max. And I think I hear sometimes from people that they say, well, I'm not creative. I can't really wonder. You know, first off, I say, you were a child once and you had wonder, like all of us, it's inborn. There is no such thing as we don't have it. We might have lost touch with it. But I also, for me, it's more than just creativity. Creativity is a piece, it's a part, or it's a way it can manifest. But wonder is about creativity and possibility. And that can, we were talking about this a little bit the other day. Can you have wonder around a spreadsheet? But I gotta tell you, I've seen some people who do wonders with a spreadsheet that it blows my mind. But that is their contribution. It's that place where they have that play, that sense of possibility. And it ends up being so much more than I could have ever done, but it contributes in a way that creates something new for everybody. And so for me, wonder is a bigger, more encapsulating term than just creativity or just curiosity. It comes out of those, grows out of those. But it's much bigger. It's a quality in my mind.
So actually on that topic related to the spreadsheet talk, somebody asked, what about, technical specialists might not be quite as accessible to a word like wonder. Yep. So how would you maybe introduce somebody in that kind of community or working group or mindset to the concept of wonder?
I have a student story around this at Australian National University in a thought leadership course that I designed and delivered last semester. I asked the students, I gave groups of students everyday objects to re-engineer. And one of the things was a whiteboard marker. I found out we throw out 3 million whiteboard markers a year in Australia, which was a kind of a sad number, but it was interesting how they could not break out of the paradigm of, I said, redesign this, but to go back to purpose. What is the purpose? I'm an instructor and I'm trying to draw something to convey, and just had to go back and demand and demand and demand. They'd say, well, maybe it's a triangular whiteboard marker. No, it's not how do you break out of the whiteboard marker? So I think you just need to provide people with the skills, and I won't go into detail here because of time, but different tools to give them the ability to break through their thinking.
And I think we've seen a whole, a whole industry and part of academia that's evolved around that, with the rise of design thinking. And you think of that whole discipline, I think, is about trying to find really tactical processes that encourage wonder. How do we have really divergent thinking and then really convergent thinking? How do you rapidly prototype? I think that's all about holding that tension of what are the facts and what are the possibilities, and making sure you don't cut off one and just play in the other one. Because, if you're just in possibility, then yeah, it's unbridled, and the more technical minded might say, well, how do you make that work? So I think there's a lot to be learned from that design thinking discipline around wonder and how to ingrain it in your processes. Yeah,
and I would say that we're the technical specialists, and I think it's once again, like we're talking about, it's very different based on the specialty, the person, even within it. But I can't think of a single industry that hasn't had breakthroughs or new ideas or things that have suddenly transformed how we do stuff in the world. That comes from somebody wondering, or something. It could just be someone walked by someone in the hall and, oh, a new thought pops out. And they go back to their computer and they code something differently, or they are an engineer and they do something differently. Some of the whole open office plan and a lot of that came out of government labs, decades ago, where they had all these offices and then common rooms that people would have to intersect. And this cross-pollination of ideas from different places is what led to everyone going back to their room and going, oh, what if this? What if that? And those were very scientific, very technical fields. So I haven't yet come up with a field that doesn't have that. And I would love to hear if there is one.
Yeah. I think you bring up a really interesting point, Cal, not to jump in here, but the diverse thinking. And we were also just talking about this, that our CFO contributes just as much to our thinking about our products as anybody on our team. We don't put her in just the finance box, but being an engineer, we have risk beaten out of us in engineering school. And that's actually a good thing. I'm sitting on the 7th story of a building right now, and I'm not worried about it falling over. We over-engineer things, and so recognizing that, and that we are brought up to not take risks, to not think outside the box. You don't think about outside the box when you're designing the steel beam for this building. And creating that psychologically safe space, that community that we talk about, that trusting community where people feel like they can come forward with ideas, and that it's okay for a finance person to come forward with an idea about how we talk about our services.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's a great segue, because really, for the last bit of this conversation, we want to dig into a little bit, well, how do we do this? How do you create wonder or cause wonder in your organization or your life?
For me, a story comes to mind of, I used to work in the youth sector at a youth organization, and like a lot of NGOs, funds are really tight. And I remember one year we were told for our yearly gathering that it was very important for the culture of our organization. They kind of said, hey, we'd love to put this on, but you've got zero funding and zero work hours. You can only use what's lying around. Go. And we had that kind of challenge put to us a lot. And I think it really could go two ways. There were a lot of times when people crashed and burned after that, because all they saw was the constraint. But there was this one year that it was a phenomenal success. 2 colleagues just pulled off, and they completely re-engineered it. They turned it into a festival that was open to the community. We had all of our people showcasing all of their talents that were outside of their roles. We had people cooking and doing life coaching and doing, how to do accounting for small businesses and all of this crazy stuff. And I think there were a few key learnings that came out of it. The first one was that wonder was really contagious. We had these 2 drivers who would just go, and I was saying this metaphor to Gretchen the other day, it was like they inflated everyone's balloons and would just come up and just go, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I think you can do. And they really unlocked people's unique gifts. They gave them this, as Evelyn, one of our colleagues, would say, like a tight, loose, tight approach, where they said, this is what we need you to do. Do it however you like, because I trust that you're fantastic at this. And at the end, this is the outcome I need. And so people had this tremendous freedom to use, their gift in their own way to create their own beautiful little piece within these constraints. And, someone in the chat said, creativity loves constraints. And I think that was a way that really unlocked wonder, and it was under that was a foundation of trust, because you had to trust people to go and do it in their own way and still deliver on that tight outcome. And I think that taught me a lot about how wonder can be built in an organization.
I love it. That's great. For me, the components I think about that to create wonder. Well, first off, I don't see it as you can't do wonder. Wonder is cultivated. It's grown. It's you create the environment and allow it to happen. But there are some ingredients that help it grow. And to me, that is community contribution and choice, which Gretchen mentioned earlier. If you can create community and enough trust in that community where people feel free to contribute fully, and that people have choice about how they interact and how they're approaching their work, that right there creates the environment, sets the groundwork. But really, diversity of perspective is key in my mind too, because the challenge getting us to wonder is what can break us out of just repeating the past or repeating our thoughts or operating from the mindsets we already have had. And that's usually when we go into brainstorming sessions with people who we brainstorm all the time with. We sort of come up with the same ideas over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. But if you deliberately create a little tension by bringing in different perspectives, different experience levels, different roles, different ways that people just see the world, and you can have an openness and an honesty with one another and truly create that trusting environment, as Gretchen was saying, where people listen deeply to one another. That's where wonder will just emerge in that environment. You know, we like to always say that the intersection of differences and trust is brilliance.
Yes.
So the most brilliant ideas come from that place. Gretchen, what would you offer?
Yeah, it's interesting. Annalise just said in the chat that you have to be wonder. And I love Max's point about how people spark wonder in other people. I think as leaders, lifting up stories of wonder, really talking about, and we all love appreciation about things. So lifting up those stories and really thanking people for to be in wonder, as Annalise said. And how different people can contribute to the process of wonder within the organization. And you know, someone else commented about the safe space being so important in the chat. It's really about people, you know, I just did a podcast with John Daly at University of Texas about selling your ideas. And he said, you know, lots of good people have great ideas, but they're just afraid. They're either afraid to bring them up, or they don't know how to. They're afraid that, you know, they'll be ridiculed, or just, you know, why bother? Nobody's going to do anything with this. So I think creating that environment where there's fertile ground for those conversations. And we talk about authentic, you know, high quality, timely conversations, making those authentic communication, conversation linkages within people will facilitate that.
That's great. Thanks, Gretchen. And with that, we are approaching the end of our time. It is incredible. I was talking to a couple of colleagues beforehand about, oh my gosh, it seems like a long time, but it flies by. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Gretchen, for joining me. A couple of things. We are doing these every week. Emma Rose will drop the link to our newsletter to sign up for our newsletter in the chat if you'd like to do that, to keep updated with all these different conversations we're having. Next week's will be about timing. You know, what is it time for now? And it really builds off of wonder with, you can't just have new ideas. The timing has to work as well. And we'll be joined by a special guest, Seba Ali from KIPP Schools in Texas, and all of the great work that they're doing there. So please join us next week if you can. And feel free to pass this on to any friends or colleagues or people you think would love to hear these conversations or be part of them themselves. So with that, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to all of our attendees and this crazy rich chat.
It's popping
Thank
off.
you, everyone.
Thanks,
Great to
everyone.
see you.
Bye, everyone.
See you. See you, team.